Houston. Good morning, Harris County. Good morning to the great state of Texas. Good morning to the great country of the United States of America. Good morning to the entire world. Good morning to every nook and cranny where our 100,000-watt transmitter penetrates the airwaves so that it gets to your FM radio. For those of you who are listening on the FM radio, whether you be in Northeast Texas, Southeast Texas, Northwest Louisiana, Southwest Louisiana, and of course, around the world through the magic of the internet, we reach people all over and they listen and they chat. So whenever you're here, folks, you're loved. Anyway, before we get any further, let's go to the geniuses en el estudio, in the studio.
Hello, genius.
Well, we're still looking for them. We're not sure that we have any yet because the genius would figure out why Arnie Arneson keeps cutting out, and I can't figure that one out. And to the man who said he wasn't going to donate another nickel to us, we apologize for the irritation we do. On this side, we have even more irritation than you do as a listener. We, we have to figure out computer
Oh,
systems. We
did a
have to figure
listener
out
call and say
timing.
that?
Yeah, he was very upset, I'm sure, about Arnie Arneson cutting out, and so am I. I mean, Arnie was making some good
Yeah.
points, and suddenly those communists cut her off. I don't know why they did
Listener,
that.
listener. I
Yeah,
want to say one thing to our kindly to our listener. We are on a very small budget. Howard is our sole guy getting all this stuff together. It's a big studio run by a few people because we only get small amount of dollars from our audience. So first of all, thank you for listening, and we apologize to you for that little mishap, but remember that you will be able to listen to that entire program on our archives. Anyway, go
oh
ahead, my
yeah,
brother.
yeah. Okay, yeah. Just imagine our aggravation up here when these tin cans and string don't hold up. It's like, holy cow! You think you're aggravated with us? Well, we're aggravated with ourselves too. Now, Egberto and I were talking earlier over the PA system or the intercom system about something I learned yesterday that's quite disturbing. It's TikTok is only owned, China only owns 20% of TikTok. The rest of it is run by Oracle in Austin. I didn't know that. So they're making this huge deal about, oh, China stealing your personal information. They're not going to steal the information. First of all, what the hell would they do with it? If they're tracking me, they're going to say this guy's boring. He goes to work and goes home. He's no
Yeah.
national threat. So what are they going to do? I mean, what are they going to do with that information? They're not going to do anything with it because they don't care. And the United States government does not care about your information either because they already have it. So this big deal about, well, China's being a threat and taking all this information that you're putting out there. Oh, so are you. Plus, China's over there. We can't do anything about them. So 20% is what they're screaming about, and the rest of it's owned by American interests. Seriously? Come on, people. What they're doing is they're limiting your choices of information. They're taking your freedom of speech right and pulling it back, saying, oh, no, it's a threat because China's going to do this. No, that's a smokescreen.
Yeah, we're
See,
kind of demonizing China, it seems like
well,
already.
well, if China had decided to pull all of the debt that we owe them and decided to export no more stuff to us, you know where we would be? Screwed because everything is made in China that we use. I mean, go to your local Walmart, made in China, all up and down the rows. You just can't find anything that isn't made in China these days. All of our electronics. If they wanted to spy on us, they could make computers and say, "Oh, yeah, okay, here's your Chinese computer," and, and they would have a big open right there because that computer could be encoded to send all the information back to Beijing or wherever. So open your eyes, people. They're trying to take another right away from you. Another right. Arnie was talking about reproductive rights. Now it's part of the state. The state can tell you what to do. Don't let them do that. We've got a very important election coming up very soon. What you do, stand up, vote, and vote those bums out. Jack, you got some wisdom for us. I see you got a whole page there.
Yeah, you know, I read Egberto's post in the morning, and it was talking about how the wealthy, their wealth is up 88% since the pandemic.
Supply chain issues.
Supply chain issues.
Balderdash, I say.
All right, and the rich keep getting richer. The economic model that funnels wealth up the chain must be confronted. All we need to do is look at Germany. Hitler, like Trump, are a madman, no doubt. But it was the same economic model used to make the German industrialists and bankers so wealthy, they started working towards expansion of territories. And we know all how that turned out. I believe the industrialists and bankers here in America were so impressed by the way Germany concentrated so much wealth into so few hands, they decided to bring it to America. Under Reagan, they flipped us to a new economic policy. They called it trickle-down economics, but it really worked as effervesce-up economics. Now, America is expanding its boundaries economically and military, and we have a madman who wants to become dictator of America. Do the math.
Yeah, no kidding. That is so true. Anyway, we'd all know how that worked out for Germany. Is it going to do the same here?
Yes.
Didn't work out.
Eventually-
It didn't.
Yes.
It did not work
if
out
we-
so well for them.
Look,
So think-
if we don't, Alistair Waters, welcome aboard Politics Done Right. You know, the answer is we have the ability to make that change and starting now to make that change. So we can change it. But what Jack said is so true. We better be careful and we better wise up. You know, we better wise up. But anyhow, today's show, my brothers and sisters. I mean, wasn't that a great commentary from our geniuses in the studio? I love that. Two subjects dear to my heart that we're also going to cover here today. So anyway, the title of the show is Billionaires' Wealth Up 88% Since the Pandemic. How long ago was the pandemic again? Wait a minute. The pandemic was 2020. Okay, so 2021, 2022, 2023, 2020. 88% return on investment. Wow. Actually, it's better than that. Their wealth went up by 88%. So the math is a lot different than that. Anyway, so the title of the show is Billionaires' Wealth Up 88% Since Pandemic in Defense of Fani Willis, Trump's Bloodbath. Like I'd say all the time, we're not going to get to cover all of that because I'm pretty sure we're going to really spend some time on billionaires. And I hope not just on billionaires, on our economic wealth distribution, etc. But I want you to call and give me your thoughts after I get into my monologue, after I play the piece on the president or the former president, because this part I want you to hear. Whatever we don't cover again, go to politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. Politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. But I do want to cover this little piece I did yesterday on Donald Trump and bloodbath. I really want you to listen. I hope I explained it well. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side. As you know, earlier, Trump did a rally where he uses the word bloodbath or something like that, and they came out and said, "Oh, he wasn't talking about this. He was only talking about the car deals or the bringing in import cars, etc." But that's not what it is. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side because there is an explanation that I use a software protocol to define later on. So let's take a look at this, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Former president made this ominous comment.
We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars if I get elected. Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars.
The Trump campaign tried to clarify, saying he was talking about the auto industry. But the Biden campaign seized on the comments, saying Mr. Trump is doubling down on his threats of political violence.
Anybody who thinks Donald Trump was speaking about, oh, cars, when he used the word, it's going to be a bloodbath if I don't get elected, just doesn't understand how this guy works. And that, he's just following the autocratic playbook. He's putting certain phrases into the ethos. He's actually doing that subliminal commendation of people. When he says it's going to be a bloodbath and that's going to be least of it, and then he interspaces that with statements on cars on the left and statements on cars on the right. In programming software, in programming protocols, we had a protocol called the Modbus protocol, right? And we had it running on top of some other protocols and software. What we would do is we'll send a whole string of message, and that message look like it's, it is just mixed up with a whole bunch of stuff, right? And then we have the software that goes ahead and selectively picks out the message that it needs. So you have this stream of data coming over. It looks like a whole bunch of gobbledygook. But in reality, in that one big stream of data, there may be data for a clock. There may be data for that have numerical data in there. There may be data for time stamping. There may be data for all these things, and they're all framed, right? And you have your software that goes in, and that whole stream is passing in front of him, and this software takes out just what it needs. This other piece of software takes out just what it's need as that stream of data goes along. That is how Donald Trump speaks. An incoherent mess of data, of words, of which every sect within his MAGA folks, they select the pieces that they are armed for. So when he talk about it's going to be a bloodbath, the militia folks see the things. When he talks about putting on tariffs on cars that nobody will be able to sell cars here, the sycophants or the particular group of folks that don't understand economics, that triggers them. So within that mass of gobbledygook that he puts out there, every segment within his MAGA population gets to extract the piece that touches them. When he goes out and talk about replacement theories and all these kinds of things, realize what they're doing. They are building a coalition in an organic manner, whereas Democrats have coalitions that they talk about. We bring in this identity, that identity, and then we try to create our message that blend all of this together. They don't attempt to do any kind of blending. They use the Modbus protocol. Well, not the Modbus, because the Modbus has some other features to it, but they use a protocol where you just go ahead and give data, and everybody of a particular sect that call themselves MAGA just extract that piece that corresponds to them, and they don't have to coexist. That's why you could have a black gay MAGA guy who, things would work fine if he hadn't gone to this white supremacist rally or whatever he went to, and then they started to use racial slurs and gay slurs on him. Well, he thought he was MAGA, and he is MAGA, because the way Donald Trump arranges MAGA is all these MAGAs don't sit down and talk policy. They extract what they want from the MAGA movement, and that is what we have to understand. Whereas we look for coherency, we look for stickiness, that we all come together of different identities, different cultures, etc., and coexist because we can have a common existence. They don't care about common existence even within the MAGA thing. And that is what I want folks to understand. Whereas there are groups looking for inclusivity, Donald Trump can also bring a coalition together, and a coalition that doesn't coexist but just exist. We have the different groups that do their own thing, right? And they just extract what they believe out of that message. It's a group of disallocated people that get fed with all the different pieces of dislocation, and they don't have to coexist. And that is what progressives and Democrats don't understand about MAGA. That is why MAGA can be, even though it's not the majority, it can actually be so large because you combine a group of disaffected people, and you do not have to have a coalition that works together. And that's the magic of what Trump does. It doesn't take any bit of smarts. It just take a bunch of goobly goop, and in such a manner that as a speech it's incoherent. But for each person that feels disaffected, that needs to hear something, they can pick it out of that bastion of incoherence. It's amazing. When that person went out there and started talking about, oh, he didn't really mean that. Don't you see on the left side he was talking about cars, and on the right side he was talking about cars. So when he said, oh, there's going to be a bloodbath, and that's just the beginning. He wasn't. He was talking about no. He was talking exactly what he wanted to say. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because that's the functional. Anyway, so I really wanted people to hear that, because the bloodbath thing was being spun. And what was my concern is that, as usual, the left and the middle jumped on what Donald Trump said. Donald Trump and them came back and say, "Oh, it was taken out of context." And for the average person who sees the entire clip, which I played the entire clip, on the left side was cars and on the right side cars, so they would have you believe that in the middle he was really meaning an economic bloodbath. No, he was not. And that's the message I want to get across. Protocol. You put a whole stream of goobly goop out there, and each disaffected person takes out the piece of the goobly goops that speaks to them. That's what we got. Anyhow, the next subject at hand, my brothers and my sisters, is another story. Wealth of U.S. billionaires hits $5.5 trillion, up 88% since the pandemic. And I want you guys to call on this 281. Whoops, I have the wrong number on my screen. How did that happen? I have the wrong framework up. 281, 713-526-5738. 713-526-5738. For those who are watching on the screen, that's the evening number. That's not the morning number. Tweet. How did I do that? Guys, I brought up the wrong profile. Anyway, the title here that I want to talk about is, and let me put it on the screen as well, is Wealth of U.S. Billionaires hits 5.5 trillion, up 88% since pandemic hit. It's been a rough few years for most people around the world, but not these folks. And says 4 years ago, the United States entered the COVID-19 pandemic. Forbes published its 34th annual billionaire survey shortly after, with data keyed to March 18, 2020. On that day, the United States had 614 billionaires who owned a combined wealth of 2.947 trillion. 4 years later, 4 years later, on March 18, 2024, the country has 737 billionaires with a combined wealth of 5.529 trillion, and 87.6% or 88% rounded increase of $2.58 trillion, according to Institute for Policy Studies calculation of Forbes real-time billionaires data. So let's stop there. I want you to think about that. And here I want to hear from my conservatives, if at all possible. I would love to hear from your voice, because math is absolute. Math in our context is absolute. 1 plus 1 in our dimension will always equal 2. 2 plus 2 will always equal 4 in our dimension. In our dimension in interspace. So math is absolute. right now, for all the inflation that we are speaking about, you sit back, many folk, and not only conservatives in this case, sit back and blame the government, blame Biden, blame all these people for inflation, for the problems that we're having in the economy. And a few shows ago, I told you we need to stop calling it inflation or the inflation rate. We need to call it the corporate greed rate. And I wasn't playing with words when I said that. I wasn't being facetious when I said that. I wasn't trying to play with words when I said that. What I wanted you to do is understand exactly what I meant. There was no real inflation, period, caused by the pandemic. I repeat, all of you who listen to CNBC and all these other stations, you accepted it at face value. You accepted the lie at face value. We can talk about supply chain problems if you want to. But the supply chain problem really wasn't our problem. It was not yet another corporate misdeed. I must go into that a little short while just to get that supply chain issue out. All right? Just to get that supply chain issue out. Let's see. I think I have a little message here. I need let me just tell you one specific about the supply chain, because this is very, very important. The supply chain issue was not created by the pandemic. It was created by man. And let me explain what I mean by that. It is important that I explain that. A few years back, there's this stuff that they created called just-in-time inventory. You see, it used to be that a corporation goes ahead and brings in a whole lot of product, and they keep minute supplies to build their products, and they keep that supply for 2, 3, 4 months or whatever it takes, because they understand that you may have hurricanes around the world if you're importing certain goods. A factory may go on strike, and strikes may last the average of, let's say, 30 days. I don't know what it is. I'm just making that up. It may last a few days or so. So what's important, though, is that's what they used to do. Now, for a one-time recovery of cash for those shareholders and executives, they went ahead and got rid of this keeping a large inventory. Inventory. So here's the deal. What happens? They said, we can get rid of all this inventory. We won't pay taxes on all of this, and we'll save the company some money, and we'll make sure that as the product come into the system, it goes out into the products we build, which means we don't have a problem with having to hold on to inventory. But that's a self-inflicted wound. Because we know in a society that can have pandemics, we know in a society that can have transportation problems or whatever, you have to build a buffer. Even electrical circuits and water circuits have that buffer. If you live in a community, you see water tanks all over the place in that community. You know what those water tanks act as? What's in electrically, they would be capacitors. In other words, when there's not main flow of data, or when there's too much request on data, those tanks are there to fill the gap. It stores water to fill the gap when there's too much people pulling at the same time, or when the actual source of water has stopped. There's a capacitance, there's a temporary capacitance that allows you to to continue receiving water, to continue receiving electricity. That is how a robust, efficient system is built. People say, well, just in time, if inventory is even more efficient because, we don't have to store inventory. Well, no, an efficient system means that when things go wrong, it still continues to work. Doesn't mean that it's the cheapest thing out there. It means that it's the most effective things to get your product out. So that part of the supply chain problem was instituted and created by corporations. That problems that it created, corporations did that. But hold up. Well, still, Levis Corporation didn't it cause the prices of things to go up? Yeah, it caused the price of imported things to go up, but it shouldn't have costed the tomato to go up, the egg to go up, and all these other products to go up. Because guess what? Those other products were dependent on a lot of petroleum. Was there ever a petroleum shortage? No, there was never a shortage of petroleum, not even during the pandemic. In fact, during the pandemic, there was a time that the companies were paying. In other words, the barrel of oil went under zero. They were paying you to take the oil because they had to keep picking up this oil. These are statements of facts, people. These are statements of fact. So there was never any real inflation, irrespective of what you're hearing on TV. We have to open our own minds. Irrespective of what you hear on TV, we never had inflation. And I brought on, and by the way, it's not just Egberto saying this, okay? I brought on Professor Richard Wolff, an economist, and I postulated this on one of the interviews that we did. Here is Egberto, the engineer that, just took economics, etc. But I wanted corroboration from the guy I call the master of economics, Richard Wolff. I think Richard Wolff is likely one of the best economists, better than Krugman and all these guys, because Krugman and all these guys simply follow a capitalist methodology as opposed to looking at the full picture, capitalism and all the other isms. So it turns out then that there was never, ever supposed to be inflation, even as we got out of the pandemic, because we had a glut of oil. It says that. So it was always gouging. It was always the corporations charging you more. And how do we know that now? We know that now because when we hear that in the last 4 years, the wealth of billionaires went up by almost 100%. 88% is closer to 100% than to 50%, right? So let's just round it off. The billionaires' wealth went up by over 100%, or by about 100%. And I have to ask you, hear me out. Where did that extra value come from? Where did that extra value that these billionaires come from? There's only one place it could have come from, and that is from you. So their inflated wealth are your inflated prices. And then they blame the government, Biden. Look, we can choose to allow them to give us a false ideology. We can allow that. We can allow them to lie to us and just sit back and believe it. They have a stake. They have a stake in letting you believe that inflation is a real thing. They have a stake in having you believe that somehow these executives and shareholders are worth more than you as a worker. They have a stake in all of this. And unless we stop allowing, why believe me as opposed to believe what they're saying? Because I'm showing you the numbers. I am showing you the numbers. If you are having such a hard time, If your wealth is not increasing, but the wealth of the people who control the economy is growing by leaps and bounds, and that is directly related to you paying more for something. Please, people, what does it tell you? What does it tell you? We have to smarten up and we have to vote appropriately. We have to smarten up and we have to vote appropriately. So, going from the article, 4 years later, on March 18th, 2024, the country has 737 billionaires with a combined wealth of 5.529 trillion and 87.6% increase. The last 4 years have been great for particular billionaires. On March 18th, 2020, Tesla CEO Elon Musk had wealth valued under $25 billion. By May 2022, his wealth had surged to 255 billion. As of March 18, 2024, Musk is worth 188.5 billion, more than sevenfold increase in 4 years. Think about that. Over 4 years, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos has seen his wealth increase from 113 billion to 192.8 billion, even after paying out tens of billions in a divorce settlement and donating tens of billions to charity. Oh my God. I rip everybody off and then I look like I'm a nice person by giving billions to charity, right? I rip everybody off. And then I say, but I'm a nice guy. Look, I'm giving billions to charity. That is like somebody picking your pocket. You have $100 in your pocket. A pickpocket comes and take the $100, and then later on, in passing, he say, "Hey, here's $10." And you say, "Oh, you are so nice. And my pocket was picked a while back, and I had nothing. At least you got me $10. Thank you." So they pick your pocket and then they go ahead and get philanthropic, and then you clap your hands. Oh, those rich people are so nice. People, we gotta smarten up. We gotta smarten up. We have got to smarten up because you know what? Nobody, the corporate structure. When we talk about not reading books or banning books and all of that, and those women out there that form part of this group banning the books, they don't realize that they themselves are pawns. They're using these things to be, we're going to ban it. It's setting up a framework of keeping you dumb. That's what it's doing. It's setting up the framework of keeping you dumb. I don't know if our phone systems are up yet or not. Are we up on the phones at all, Jack, or are we still having a few issues right there? Well, I guess I'll hear from Jack in a little bit, but we have, I think we've been having a few issues this morning, folks. It happens. It happens. It happens when you have a station working on minimal dollars. It happens, but you know what? The good thing about it is we're still flying high over the internet. So we are also on YouTube, and all the other channels are still out there for us to get through. So you will be able to get to the podcast. Also, remember, just go to politicsdoneright.com/newsletter, politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. Eric Hayes says billionaires won't go pour at your direction because they will leave and then see where things land. And raise the corporate tax rate to 28% and see where jobs go, and what happens will get taxed. Okay, I want to engage with you on this one, Eric, because when I tell you that is slave thinking. That mindset is the thought process of a slave, right? And let me explain what I mean by that. You have given inordinate power to a billionaire. A billionaire is one person, flesh and blood, like me, like you, like anybody else. That one billionaire. That billionaire can only hold on to the billions that he's legally stolen if he can convince the rest of us that he has some inherent right to that monies. So we build an infrastructure, a mental infrastructure, by indoctrinating people like you, my brother Eric, and others into believing that this is just how the system works. And then people like you who don't have much. When I say, I know you're independent and all of that, but when I say much, I mean compared to the billionaire. They depend on people who don't have much, or even people that are poor. They tell a believable story to them, and then those people are there to defend them. Look, if we turned if we immediately decide we're not going to allow this to occur anymore, there is nothing Jeff Bezos's money cannot save Jeff Bezos unless he has sycophants that believe he's inherently worth what he has. And that's what we have. People who believe he's inherently worth what he has. But any day society decides to change, and there are many ways to do that, we actually take back what ours. Eric says being jealous and taking others' wealth is not right. That is the point. They have 100 or no, wrong. I'll ask you a question, Eric, and I'm reading Eric's interaction in the chat, folks. You said being jealous and taking others' wealth. Okay, let's pause right there. If I got wealthy by picking your pocket, if I got wealthy by picking your pocket, should I not recover what was stolen? Yes or no? We're talking about pickpockets right now. We're not talking about billionaires who followed the legal rules to become billionaires. We're talking about pickpockets here. If you pick a whole lot of pockets and got wealthy from picking pockets, should we be able to recover what you have stolen? Yes or no? And since you haven't answered yet, I'll answer that we should be able to recover it. Now, if you have paid off politicians to pass laws that favor you and harm the masses, great. You didn't answer the question, Eric. You just said no one is picking pockets, and I'm saying yes, they are. And here is how the pockets are picked. It's an ingenious way of picking pockets, right? Who writes the laws? The people we elect. But if they are writing the laws because a wealthy person over time allowed them to create these laws where they are allowed to pick your pockets legally, then they have picked your pocket because they usurped the system. What did they do? They paid off the people who write the laws that allows picking your pockets to be legal. So therefore, since they used the law to make picking your pocket legal, we can make the laws to make picking your pocket to recover what was picked. All right? That's all we got to do. Write the law to recover from the law that allowed your pocket to be picked legally. And that can be done in many forms, including certain types of wealth taxes, etc. Recover what was stolen legally in a legal form. It's not magical thinking. It's what should be done. And those people who are constantly defending the wealthy, who buy politicians to pass laws to make everybody's life difficult, should pay. Okay, we've got to understand that. We've got to understand that. So, folks, look, for those on the radio, there we evidently have a tower problem, but we're here. We're still here on the internet. We have a lot of listeners on TikTok right now. I mean, rather on Twitter right now, as well as on our stream. Always you can go to politicsdoneright.com or rather politics.tv, politicsdoneright.tv, politicsdoneright.tv to see it on YouTube as well. For those of us who cannot pick it up on the radio. Sorry for the mishap that's happening, but you can stream at kpft.org as well, kpft.org. So anyhow, that I guess since we're not going to have a whole lot of callers, or if callers want to call in, they can always call in to 713 526-5738 if you're listening on the chat and want to call in. But again, you know what we do here. We try our best to get everybody answered. So again, back to Eric Hayes. Eric, as it turns out, you have to change your modal of thinking. I've been speaking to a whole lot of people lately, and it's so hard. It is, I understand, it is very, very hard to change how we were indoctrinated. Okay, the economic system, how we've learned about certain things within our economy, it's a bad thing. But anyway, I have one more piece to play. Trisha James, what's wrong with Trisha James? She did a great thing. She's going to take some of all the stolen taxes that Donald Trump failed to pay to New York, that for either inflating or disinflating his buildings, he's going to pay. And that is where we need to go. We need to start recovering that which was stolen by people who don't have the wherewithal to do it. But anyhow, one more video. It seems like we're going to get to the video since we hadn't gotten a whole lot of calls. So let's go to the Katie Thang video. And let's see. This year we will pay thousands in taxes. How is that and why? We're going to pay that because we have suckers in the system who don't pay their own, like all the people who get paid by stock appreciation. They don't pay taxes on that appreciation, right? Learn some economics, my brother. Learn some economics. All right, let's go ahead and play the second video, and then we'll take it on the other side. I have been rather perturbed about the Fani Willis Nathan Wade saga, right? Yes, they came up with this RICO case against the president, and the president henchmen went ahead to investigate to find out that after all, Fani Willis was having a romantic relationship with Nathan Wade. And then they try to make it into something that it wasn't. Somehow there's profit for Nathan Wade by prosecuting the former president, et cetera, et cetera. Now, these are things that happen all the time. Prosecutors hire contractors. They all make the same thing, as was the case here in this county, in the Fulton County. But what's upsetting is it's the what's not said, the connotation that people try to make with Fani Willis, as if they try to demonize her, make her less than, make her seem slutty, etc. And sadly, a lot of that has to do with using the stereotypes of Black women that has always been false. And that's what they did there. They try to build up on these particular stereotypes. Now, the fact of the matter is, I've worked in corporate America for several years, and the issue with Nathan Wade and Fani Willis is a constancy. The issue with boss and subordinate having relationships, it's standard. I worked at NASA, I worked at Ford, I worked at all these places, and I could tell of this happening all of the times. Not that it's right or wrong, but that it just happens. But the media is running with it, and the media helped Trump and his people make it a story that wasn't. In fact, even the judge fell for it. The judge that should know better fell for it. He could have opened the case if he needed to and closed it right away. No evidence. There was nothing in that case that would have proven that Fani Willis, maybe it doesn't look good to some people, but did anything wrong. And I'm not defending this woman because she's a Democrat or she's going after Trump. I'm defending this woman because of a double standard. The person being on trial here is a horrendous person in Donald Trump. And when Fani Willis went out there and said that, remember, she's not on trial. They are people who attempted to overthrow the United States of America that's on trial. There is this guy who tries to throw a morality bomb on Fani Willis when he himself is, what again? The daddy of several baby mamas. He's a thief. He's a He does all the things that they would try to put onto Fani Willis. He is guilty of, and many in his ilk as well on trial. And yet the media makes it seem like the folks that we should be concentrating on is Fani Willis and Nathan Wade. It is great that Katie Fang, just point blank, comes out and says just as much. This judge should have not gotten there at all. Listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side.
I love Paul Butler, and because I love him, I'm going to disagree with him in the following way, and with respect, because I always disagree with respect. There was zero evidence that Fani Willis did anything wrong. No evidence, right? Judge McAfee said there was no material financial benefit that was realized by Fani Willis. He said that there was no conflict of interest because she never started this investigation and prosecution and indictment to benefit herself. He made it clear that there was nothing wrong that she did. That in and of itself could have ceased the analysis, and that could have been the end of it. It didn't have to go any further. What is the hypocrisy that really bothers me is this purity test that has to be applied to everyone else but the Republicans. It's this purity test that you have to pass if you are not a member of the GOP. And to that point, it's Letitia James and Fani Willis that are always the ones that get more scrutiny because of who they are. But if you're a Republican, it's okay because you can grab them by the you-know-what and get away with it.
Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, Paul Butler, cried, screamed, had a breakdown in front of the world, and no one questioned whether his comportment in that hearing meant he was unfit to be on the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito have taken what really look like bribes from billionaires to take them on fancy schmancy vacations. They sit on cases in which they shouldn't. His wife is an insurrectionist. He didn't feel he had to recuse. No one says these men made mistakes. And so I lovingly disagree with you as well. What mistake did she make? The people meet on the job all the time. They date people on the job all the time. This is not an unusual thing. Is it the best decision? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it worked out very well. This is like he was the right man for her, whatever. But that has nothing to do with the RICO case, sir. And I'm like,
so let's be clear, folks. You can try to put these types of stereotypes onto people. You can do all of this, but the reality remains that it is Donald Trump and his ilk on trial. The reality remains that nothing Fani Willis and Nathan Wade did isn't something that is modus operandi throughout America's offices, whether professional or otherwise. And if you are allowing this, what the media is doing, if you are allowing all of this to occur, let's be clear. You better check yourself and figure out what's the rationale for your thoughts. What's the rationale for your thoughts? What's the rationale for your thoughts? Anyway, folks, thank you for being here. We are, in fact, having some issues with the transmitter, but we're filled up on Twitter and everywhere else. We're on Twitter. We are on Twitch. We are on YouTube. We are on LinkedIn, everywhere. So there are a lot of other places that carry the show live. And of course, those of you will always be able to go ahead and pick up the program at our archive, either at kpft.org or at politicsdoneright.com. So you are covered no matter what. We make sure we have all avenues of distribution covered. Anyway, folks, so I wanted to play that Fani Willis piece because yet again, we allow our media to change the subject or take our eyes off the ball, just like with the billionaires and inflation rate versus corporate greed rate, etc. We allow the media to take us off the ball. So going back to our subject on billionaires, I want, by the way, we expect to get a whole lot of calls, but today with the problem with the technical issues we have with the transmitter, we are apparently the people that call in are not calling in right now. But let me just say this with billionaires, and I want to people to really understand this. An economy is a closed system. The economy is a closed system. All right. It's a closed system that all the pieces within the economy can create expansion, right? It create expansion if you have if your money moves faster. In other words, if I buy bread and I eat a little bit more of that bread and have to hurry up and buy some more, that creates an expanding economy. How? Because if I look at it over time, what occurs is I'm using more product, creating more consumerism, and that means it has to be serviced with more jobs, etc. So the entire economy grows. And what you want to do is grow that economy in a consistent manner, a manner that doesn't create a whole lot of unevenness. That's just how an economic system works. However, if your economy is slowly growing because people are buying more stuff, etc., and you need more people to work to supply them, then you would want that wealth created from that economic growth to be dispersed commensurate with the work that you do in that economy. But that's not what happens, right? And let me explain first of all. In a When you see an economy growing, uh, it should not. It's not at all. What's the word that I want to use? It's not sustainable if everybody within that economic system, the income that they have in this growing economy is at 0 or 1 or 2%. When there are some people in that growing economy making 7, 8, 10%. In the case of Bezos and those guys, they were growing at leaps and bounds every year. That's not sustainable, right? Because what that means is if the economy is a closed system, which it is, all right, and a person or a group, a small group, are taking out an inordinate amount of money out of that economy or making the spoils out of that economy, and the rest of us not, it means that every year a smaller portion of that economy gets to the rest of us, the vast majority, the 99%. Very small amount uh, of increase, if any, while the others continue to make. So that means they continue to occupy a bigger part of that economy and you a smaller part. And because they grow bigger, there's this stuff called the limits when we used to do integration and limits, right? What eventually happens is they eventually own everything but a sliver. And that is the pathway, the economic pathway to slavery. Because at that point, you work for them to feed you, and you have the ability to build nothing. I know it sounds macabre. I know how that sounds, but that is exactly the way it is. And for us to support an economic system like we are right now, and it's not an old system, it's a very young system. So it takes a while for all the damage to be done, right? It took a while for colonization to really destroy economy after economy. You know, we don't like to call maybe what was in Africa or Polynesia or all these things but they had their own economic system that works for them, sustainable over centuries, if not millennia, right? But we continue to take and take and take and take and take from all over the world. But eventually you reach a point where there's no more to take. The same thing occurred in America, right? We took and took and took and took and took, from we had slaves, we had indentured servitude, etc. We created employees, which was the new form of slavery, just with a little bit more class. And I know people don't like when I say that, but if you take a look at the mechanics, it's quite obvious. A slave had to be clothed. A slave had to be kept healthy. A slave had to have all these things, which were expenses for the person who owned the slave. The employer don't have to do any of that. Doesn't have to clothe you, doesn't have to feed you, doesn't have to do anything. We'll give you what we can. You find a way to make do. And if you don't like it, c'est la vie. If you get sick, c'est la vie. We don't have a problem with you because you're no longer property. You're just an employee, right? But you have more freedoms than slaving, that you can leave and go while the slave couldn't leave and go. But there are trade-offs, right? No, I'm getting silly here, but I think you all get exactly what I'm talking about. We need a change in our economic system. We need to start talking more about all of us sharing the spoils of what we created. And until then, we are on a path to a new kind of slavery. And right now we have antiseptic slavery. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And when you hear some of the people in our chat talk about if we stick it to the rich, and we're not trying to stick it to the rich, but if we go ahead and charge them taxes, they'll just leave and go where? Who's going to defend their wealth? They need the American army, the big bad army. Anyway, let me run back to Jack and see if Jack has anything to say before I close this baby out. Are you there, Jack? Or are you too busy messing with?
We're not getting out still. There's a problem out at the tower, and Howard's on his way out there to see if he can correct it.
Yeah,
So
well,
just want
you
to
know,
keep the lights on and everything running until the signal gets corrected.
well, you know what's a good thing about it, Jack, is that in as much as we didn't have our airwaves today, we had good coverage on all our streaming networks, because I'm looking at the viewers on Twitter and quite a other few places, and we did get the show out. But everybody needs to know that the show will be on the feed, the archives, and you can go to politicsdoneright.tv, politicsdoneright.tv, to watch it on YouTube as well. But folks, please remember, everything that we cover here, you can pick up at politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. That is politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. And that way we are able to continue to connect. Anyway, I got to get out of here. My name is Egberto Willis. This is Politics Done Right. And you guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Out. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number 1, subscribe to our channel, and number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that